Coach, have you ever walked away from a game thinking, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Or I did not show up as the coach I wanted to be in that game. Maybe you froze. Maybe you second guessed. Maybe you blew up or said things out of frustration that helped no one. And as a coach for the past 14 years, I've led my team to 4 state titles, and I still have moments that I wish I could take back. And if you're in the same boat as me, well, welcome. But also this video is for you because I'm going to be talking about how you can respond as a coach in those pressure moments, especially when you're feeling frustrated, when you don't have the words to say, or you say the thing you wish you wouldn't have said. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how to stay in control when the game is out of control, including the moment that I lost the entire game for my team because I got flustered, how your presence sets the tone and why your team feeds off of your energy more than your words. And I'll also walk you through my framework for how to lead an effective timeout, what to say and what to do to get your team to actually play better at the end of that timeout instead of just walk back out onto the court or the field and become more confused than ever. Now, before we get into it, I do want to give a shout out to a coach in our community. This coach, his name is Tom. He sent me an email recently. He's actually using our program, Plug and Play Elite Mental Game for Teams, with his volleyball team. So he used it with his team this season. I believe it was volleyball. But he said this. He shot me an email just to kind of let me know how it went for him this season. He said, we focused on 2 areas, visualization and the snapback. The latter was the big thing for us, and all 37 girls listed out their snapback process, and it was discussed a lot in our mental health Monday routines before practices. We actually handed out snapback hats to those who demonstrated the ability to rebound or practice the routine in practice. It was a big hit. My team loved it, and that kind of ownership from athletes just happened. It's built. So amazing. Tom, I just want to give you a shout out for implementing this, for trusting the process, for allowing your team the ability to actually use one of the number one skills when it comes to mental training, the snapback routine. I'm going to be talking about it in today's episode as well, but just want to give a shout out to Tom and also to your whole team and how creative to give snapback hats to the athletes that were demonstrating their snapback routine. I'm sure that was a huge hit. So awesome job to you. All right, let's get into it. What I want to talk about today about just making sure that as coaches, we are emotionally regulated. I'll be honest, as a coach, I am not one to lose my cool very often, but I know that a lot of coaches do, and it's very easy to do. That doesn't mean that on the inside, I am not stressed, frustrated. Like any of you that have like Oura rings or Apple Watches or Whoop bands that like measure things, I can't tell you the amount of times that I'm coaching a match and it's like detecting a workout, or afterwards I look at the Oura and it'll be like highly stressed, blah, blah, blah. Like, and so a lot of people that are watching me coach are like, wow, you look so calm. But like on the inside, I know coaches can relate with me on this one. Like it is anything but calm, and you're trying to figure things out, and the game is causing you to be frustrated and stressed and all the things. Okay. That's very, very normal. And our emotional regulation and our ability to think clearly in those moments and be the coach that our team needs in those moments is essential. And so staying in control when the game feels like it's out of control is key. Okay. So emotions are high. Teams making errors, maybe teams not playing how you want to play or how you want them to play. Things are the wheels are falling off and things can get really rough. I'll tell you a story from early on in my coaching career, super embarrassing, actually. We were playing this game and it was in the 5th set, deciding set in volleyball. And we were towards the end and it was like getting tied up, and eventually it got to the point where the other team had 14, we had 13, so they needed one more point to win. I was flustered, stressed. I didn't really know what to do. I was like, I got to do something. Call the timeout. Didn't hear my assistant coach being like, hey, you don't have any more timeouts. And at the time, the rule was if you called an additional timeout, you got a red card. A red card meant that another point went to the other team. So in this case, I called timeout that I didn't have, got a red card, gave a point to the other team, and they won the match. I was mortified as a coach, especially as a young coach. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? And I know coaches, we all make mistakes, but really it was because I didn't know how to manage the moment. I was just like frustrated and I felt like I didn't know what to do. So just going to call a timeout and thought everything was cool until it wasn't. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm the one who lost the game for us. But when we coach from a place of panic, when we coach from a place of frustration, it actually does not stabilize our team. It does the opposite. opposite. It destabilizes them. And so it doesn't mean that as coaches, we aren't supposed to feel things. We just need a plan for what to do when they happen. And just like we teach our kids how to emotionally regulate and we expect them to be emotionally regulated, like we don't want them flying off the handle and like saying, things to their teammates, like that has to be us too. And even something as simple, I know this might sound so simple, but even as simple as like a reset word, like what we teach in the snapback routine. So as a coach now, like utilizing just a deep breath when I'm in those moments of like frustration so I can think clearly, saying a reset word so that I don't say something that I regret later. Because I don't know about you, but it's really easy to say things that, are not helpful in those moments. And we'll talk about the timeout strategy in a little bit here because I now do have a specific timeout structure that I use to help me kind of help my team so that I'm not just like saying random things that are not helpful. But a deep breath, a reset word, a grounding cue. So like touching the clipboard, saying a phrase, looking at the intent, something like that so that you're kind of clear-minded and can act, okay? And so remember, under stress, your brain pulls from the amygdala, which is the fight or flight. This is the same thing that we teach athletes when they're under stress and they're under pressure, is that like your fight or flight response is going to kick in. So we have to be able to regulate ourselves so that we can use our prefrontal cortex, which is where like the logic is. And that's really what we want to be leaning on instead of just this like fight or flight response. And our team also mirrors this. We're going to talk about this in a second, but we have something called mirror neurons in our brains that other people, especially our team that's looking to us as leadership, is going to mirror. So that's why we really want to make sure that we are setting that example. The other thing though, I'll note is that just like we teach athletes, there are moments as coaches that we know derail us more than others. And so maybe it is like for me, I have to pre-plan for those things. And same thing goes for athletes. Like we actually ask them to pre-plan for like situations that typically get them off track so that they use their snapback routine and they can kind of get back to the present moment. As a coach, I get flustered when my team is down by a few points or we're letting momentum slide. And so I need to kind of pre-plan. What am I going to do in those moments? What am I going to say to myself? What is my action plan? So regulating myself with like my breath, things like that. But then also like, what's the action plan? If we're down by a few points. For me, it's like I need to, instead, because I tend to freeze. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Oh no, we're getting down. Okay, so either I'm going to adjust serve receive. I am going to call a timeout if that's the appropriate thing in that situation. I'm going to sub somebody in or out. Like I need to actually have an idea of some action items that I can do in those moments. I know you're like, well, this should be natural. It's sometimes not. Like for those of us coaches that either just get flustered and frustrated and kind of freeze and not know what to do, like it's helpful just to have something written down, like when I'm in this situation, this is what I'm going to do. Or those of us that do get like super emotionally charged and frustrated, just reminding us that like, okay, this is what I'm going to do and how the coach I want to be in this moment and how I want to respond is how I'm going to show up. So those are the opportunities that we have. So even pre-planning a little bit, what are those situations? What are the situations that cause you to kind of, go off in an inappropriate way? And what I mean by that is like, it's actually not helpful for your team. I will know that yes, it is good to like have energy. And I'll talk about that in the next part. It's good to show your team that you're passionate and that you care, but the line where it is like good energy that's encouraging your team. And then the type of like kind of, energy that's going to derail your team, meaning it's like negative energy. It's going off on a ref. It's, all of those things that are actually going to like cause your team to lose when it comes down to it. So that is the first one. You've got to be able to regulate yourself and stay in control when the game feels out of control. So what are the ways that you do that? Pre-plan for some of those situations and then have a plan for it. Have some sort of snapback routine, some breath, reset word, things like that. Write something on your clipboard that's going to remind you of how you want to show up in those moments as a coach. And then literally have an action plan. Like, what are the specific things that you're going to do? For me, I'm not going to let 3 points go by without changing something. So for me, I'm like, okay, the list of things I can change is, I can call a timeout, I can sub, I can change up the serve receive. I can ask for a lineup check. So what are the things that you can actually do so that you're prepared in those moments? All right. Part 2, next session. How your presence actually sets the tone. How you show up is so important. And I've seen it time and time again, and I've experienced it as a coach. Your actions, your energy, your presence really does set the tone for your team. They say that your team takes on the personality of your coach. And so if you want your team to be fill in the blank, you want them to be calm under pressure. You want them to be energized and excited and passionate. You want them to hype each other up. Like, you as a coach set that tone for your team. And I've seen so many coaches, and again, experienced it myself, where if you disengage, if you kind of sit on the bench and lean back, cross your arms and act like you don't care about anything, like, your team is not going to respond well to that. And I know sometimes it's hard because we're like, sometimes I don't know what else to do and I need the message to get across, but it is not helpful. Like, staying engaged as a coach, even when your team is losing or not doing well, is sometimes really hard, but that's what we have to be and what we have to do for our team. I've been in so many situations, as a coach, where my team is losing, or we're losing a set, or we're down, and I still have to be that energy. I still have to, make sure that they see that I'm engaged. And then, like, they turn it around. Like, the next set is a different story. And I'm like, oof, so glad that I stayed engaged through that, because how embarrassing if I would have just like checked out, and not, like, it could have been a totally different story for my team. Plus, you want to make sure that you are like showing your team that you're invested, that they can trust you, and that you're consistent in how you're going to show up. And I don't mean I'm consistent because I like always get super angry and frustrated. I'm consistent that no matter what's going on, if the game is going, I'm going to be in it with you. So, having this like roller coaster of emotion coach is a really hard coach to play for. So as much as possible, how do you want your team to show up? That's what the tone that you're going to set. I want you to think of yourself as a thermostat rather than a thermometer. Maybe you've heard this analogy, but thermometers react. Thermometers just kind of like tell you what's going on. Okay. They're like, your team is stressed. Okay. It'll just tell you that. But a thermostat is the one that sets the tone. Okay. You go to your thermostat to set what degree you want your house to be. Okay. That is what I want you to view yourself as a coach. You are the thermostat that kind of sets the tone for your team. That's where I want your mind to be, not just the reactive type that just is like, oh, my team is stressed. My team is under pressure. They're falling apart. Oh, they're happy. They're all, and they're just kind of reading. You're just like, oh, okay, that's what's going on in the team. You are the one setting the tone. And so your calm facial expressions when the pressure is on, your positivity, okay, your belief in them, your energy, right? If you want them to be excited, that's what they're going to be looking to. You're also kind of like the flight attendant in this whole situation. What I mean by that is, like, when a plane is going down, I'm sure you've heard this analogy when it comes to parenting. When a plane's going down or experiencing turbulence, I wouldn't say going down, the plane is experiencing turbulence, the passengers are looking at the flight attendant. I'm like, how are the flight attendants looking? If they look frantic and they're like freaking out, I'm like, oh, I've got reason to worry here. But if they're like, hey, it's all right, like, fasten your seatbelts, here's your pretzels, okay? Then I'm like, all right, things are cool. So same thing for you. Your team is looking to you, even if you don't think that they are, like, you are the one that really is setting the tone. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes, that we're not going to say things that we regret. Now, the beauty in that is very similar to parenting as well. We could go back and we can repair. We can come back to our team. We can say, hey, I did not respond in that moment the way that I wanted to respond. And that's a beautiful thing. When you can be vulnerable with your team like that and you can apologize, and there are situations like that, actually builds trust, as long as you don't just turn around and like repeat the same thing over and over again. But that act of repair and saying like, hey, in that I was just as stressed as you were, and I didn't respond to it in the way that I wanted to. I've had to do this with my team a few times over the course of the past, decade plus. One of the times, there's been a few times where I've said things that I regret, specifically after a game. Okay. And I've learned after a game, a good thing for me to say now is, we did some good things. Especially, I'm talking like if I'm frustrated, we did some things well. We also did some things not well. I'm going to have to watch the film and kind of think about this, and we'll reconvene tomorrow to talk about this. Okay. Because when I start to dissect a game right after, I am only looking at the negative. If I'm frustrated, I'm like, we didn't do this right. We didn't do this right. This is frustrating. We practiced this all week and now we're not. And I tend to say things I regret. And those are the nights that keep me up as a coach. I'm like, I wish I would have just said nothing. Okay. And so I've learned, like, after a game as a coach, to just, see it if possible. I'm going to pull out some good things, but if I can't find anything to say, I just default to, we did some things well. We did some things not so well. I'm going to have to watch the film a little bit, but we'll talk about this tomorrow. Get some sleep, head held high. You still got the jersey on, like things like that, so that I'm just like not saying things that I regret. But there was one time that I, multiple times, but one time in particular that is coming to mind where I had to apologize to my team because I got so flustered in this like district game. We were playing a team that we've had a rivalry with, still do, like over the years, and we were playing really well. But then like we were kind of in this situation where we weren't quote unquote supposed to win, but we were doing really well. And we got to, though it was close, we got to like this fourth set situation, and I forgot to put in my libero. So my like basically my defensive player, and you have to like note them on the roster. And I was like so emotionally like all over the place in that game that I didn't put them in. Totally my fault. And I had to kind of like pivot on my toes, figure out a solution. The ref came over to me and was like, you didn't put a libero in, so you can't use one. So basically that means I have like liberos don't abide by the subbing rules. So like you only get a certain amount of subs. And so I was going to run into sub trouble, and I was going to have people playing in positions that they weren't normally playing in. It was like this whole thing that I was like, oh my gosh, putting my team in this like stressful situation where they already were stressed. And I like shut down. I couldn't even like coach. I had to have my assistant coach take over because I was like, I am so like too emotionally gone to be able to function and coach this game. Like, how did I just do that? And so not my best moment. I had to like go back, apologize to my team. And we ended up winning that game, by the way. Like they totally came through for each other and for me. And so it ended well, but I went back and I was like, I'm so sorry. Like that is totally my thing. And I just like did not manage the moment well and made an error, but didn't really come back from it in a way that I wanted to. So anyways, long story short, like that opportunity actually was good for like the opportunity to apologize. And the team was like, hey, it's okay. Like, we played hard and it ended up going really well. But any chance that you get on repair and apology for the way that you acted or the decisions that you made is a really good opportunity for you to build trust and vulnerability with your team. So if you do make a mistake or you do get into the situation where you say something you regret, please don't just sweep it under the rug. Please don't just act like it didn't happen, because your players notice, and owning up to it is also a really great way to show them how they can own up to their mistakes and things like that. Okay. All right. So we've gone over two things so far. First, you got to stay in control when the game's out of control. Have a grounding signal, reset routine, things like that. Have a plan for those situations that commonly throw you off. Know that your presence sets the tone. The mirror neurons is a real thing. Your team is watching you. They're feeding on your energy. Be the team that you need to be, or be the coach that you need to be for your team. Because gosh, it's really easy to be a energetic, fun, really good coach when your team is winning. Okay. What do you do when they're not? What do you do when they're making errors? What do you do when you're like, why are we in this situation? That is the coach that your team is going to remember. And that's what they're going to feed off of. And lastly, this one, how to run a timeout. Let's talk about timeouts. When I first started coaching, timeouts were actually one of those things that I was like, how do you do this? I don't know what to say. And sometimes it just turns into an opportunity to lecture your team, ends up not working out. I'll tell you, in volleyball, we only get 30 seconds. I think. Is it 30 seconds or 60 seconds? I don't know, but it's not very long. But most of the time they don't work because coaches just use them as like an emotional dumping ground, or overloading their team with information. So if your players are already emotionally activated, typically a timeout, if you're calling a timeout, things aren't going super well, right? So either you need to like break the momentum, you got to give them some information. Obviously, sometimes if the other team is calling a timeout, then you have it's maybe not one of those situations, but they can't process that much information. And if you're just like emotionally dumping on them and telling them everything they did wrong, how do you expect them to go out and actually like have any useful information for, the next play and the next opportunity? So I'll give an example of a timeout situation actually just this past state tournament that I had. So I was in the fourth set. My team was in the fourth set. We were up. Okay. It was 23, 22 or something like that. The other team started to come back. So then it was tied 23 all. I called timeout. They were getting a run, so I called timeout. And in that moment, I remember thinking like, honestly, we're frustrated because we could have been done with this set. Like we could win this set and be done, but instead we're letting this other team go on a run. And what I wanted to say was like, what the heck are you doing? Finish this game and move on. Okay. But instead it was, you know what? We have let them go on a run of a few points. Here's what we're going to do now. Everyone, we're going to do our snapback routine. Okay. Take a deep breath. Say a reset word, exhale. Again, that takes like 2 seconds or less. So I have a shared language of my team because they all have learned something called a snapback routine. It's a way for them to regulate themselves and get back in the present moment. So it's one of the first skills that I teach in our mental training program that I've implemented program wide. If you want to know more about that, and if you want a way to do this with your team in a way that's very simple, go to coachfreetraining.com. I teach the snapback routine plus some other really simple mental training tools that you can be doing with your team. But it's a game changer when you have, first of all, a shared language with your team to be able to do that. And they all have their individual snapback routines. So every one of them has a different reset word and I don't know all of them, and they all have reset signals as well. So they know what it means when I say, do your snapback routine or say your reset word. So anyways, we did that, took like 2 seconds, and then I focused on the next play. Okay. And I was like, next play, we're going to pass a three. We're going to start outside. We're going to get this next point. Okay. And so the keys to this, kind of the framework that I follow, is acknowledge the moment. We're rattled. we let a string of points go by. Okay. But we're okay. Give a reset strategy. All right. So something that's going to kind of ground them. Give them one clear step, one thing that we're going to focus on for this next play when we go back out there. And then the last part of this is just leave them with a belief about themselves. We talk about all these things, like this identity of our team throughout the season. We have our core covenants. We talk about our motto, things like that. So I'll say something like, we're built for this. Let's go. So leave them with some sort of belief about themselves as they step back onto the court. So I did that. Now, I never said that this framework is fail-proof. Not it works every single time. So we lost that next point. Not the plan. Okay. I don't remember how we lost it, but I called another timeout. I was like, all right, so that is not how we wanted that to play out. Okay. We have another opportunity here. So if you need to do your reset routine, do it. Take a breath if you need it. But this is what we're going to do on this next play. This is the opportunity we have. This is what's going to happen. So again, kind of forecasted. Went out there. They did it this time. Okay. We were able to get that point, and then we got the next two to actually win that set, go on to the fifth, and win state. So it might take a couple of times, but that framework has never failed me as far as giving me a direction of how I can help my team in those moments. And so, because again, if you go off of emotion, and I'm not saying that your kids can't see you emotional, I think that is a good thing. But if you just kind of let yourself get carried away and just give them a lecture and like 35 things to think about, you're really not doing any good. So following that framework has really saved me as a coach. So again, acknowledge the moment that you're in, some sort of reset strategy to reset the energy, give them one clear next step, leave them with a belief about themselves as a team. And again, if you want to know how I teach the snapback routine so that they have that, and we have a shared language, go to coachbretraining.com, because that has been a game changer, especially in that state moment, like the state championship game, pressure-filled situations, like having a shared language to kind of fall back on and having them have skills is like, woo, it is truly a game changer. Now, other things around timeouts, I've had it done before where like I'll have one of my leaders lead a timeout. I'll pull the setters aside and kind of talk to them. It kind of depends on what's going on. Like if I call a timeout, usually I have something to say. If the other team calls a timeout, then I will do maybe some sort of other configuration. I'll have the captain. I'll say like, hey, like you're going to lead this one. I'm going to take the setters or something like that. I kind of mix it up a little bit. And maybe you have some other strategy that you use for timeouts. I would love to hear about that in the comments below. Let me know, because I'm always open to other ways of doing things. But that framework has been helpful for me as a coach. All right. I hope this was helpful as we wrap up. Some things that I want you to take away is that it's okay for you to be emotional as a coach. I think it's good for your players to see your energy, your personality, your passion. I think that's so, so important. But also, if you get carried away and you're out of control when the game is out of control, that is how they're going to act too. So stay in control, even if the game feels out of control. Your presence sets the tone. They are mirroring you. And so show up as the coach that you want to be, and also show up as the coach that your team needs, implementing and reinforcing the identity of your team. And then let's run timeouts that are actually effective. Instead of lecturing or giving them a million things to think about, let's use an actual strategy and a framework to lead timeouts that are going to empower your team and cause them to play better. All right, coaches, I'm Coach Bre. This is the Coach Her Game podcast. I will see you in the next episode.